banking sector, and even with a big headline making the rounds this morning saying that customers, investors should go make their withdrawal coming in from some other, well, from the Nigeria Security and Exchange Commission. Well, people have been asking what remains of the 3 nationalized banks. Joining us to look is a financial consultant, Mr. George Orie. Good to have you join us this morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Well, amcon, bank ownership, and all of this, the NDIC, they say nationalized banks still open to new investors. How positive can people be with going into all of that? But again, let's look at how you took the news when it dropped over the weekend. 3 banks finally, well, got what they call the bridge banks. It's
really alarming. All this while, we thought the shareholders are still trying to hold the CBN to ransom. But all of a sudden, we had the news. There's nothing we can do. But this economic lacuna being practiced by the CBN governor and his management team is actually putting the whole country into a quagmire. And we are looking at the situation whereby if it does not tread softly, it might jeopardize our economic emancipation. Considering the fact that the European industry now, or the financial world, are actually experiencing the fever at the moment. If you look at virtually all the banks that came up together to arrange the bailouts for the Greece economy, it's not going well for them. And it's like a chain reaction. If you observed yesterday, the London street in the last 2 days have been on riot as a result of strict austerity measure, so as to be able to buff up their stake in European Central Bank status. But looking at it locally, nationalized banks, what is the way forward? Is it the actual takeover that's actually the problem? Sequel to this dispensation, we had a situation whereby amcon provided a bond, 1.7 trillion bond, as a result of a way to be able to ensure that other banks that were actually assigned new management had temporary relief. But we now discover that after a while, they are still discussing as regards takeover, like Spring Bank now. We had the case whereby accusation came up as regards insider trading, which jeopardized due process. And if among the special assistant to the CBN governor is being accused of maybe, having an interest in one of these nationalized banks, then we have the situation whereby the whole process needs to be revisited. So I wouldn't blame investors who are running about, because that was how Savannah started. That was how other Society General started then. And people need to be able to ensure that their money is within reach.
What's the place of NDIC in all of this and amcon? Because they say with the coming in of NDIC and amcon, well, our monies wouldn't go the way of the Societe as well as Savannah. We'll have our monies intact.
Well, it depends on how strong Nigerian bonds are. If you look at, take for example now, the Chad industry now. Recently, they just issued their bonds and it was oversubscribed. But it's not the issue of being oversubscribed, but how physical, how realizable are those assets in terms of when you want to call in the guarantee. And we are looking at a situation whereby if initially amcon has already provided a bond in order to ensure that these banks are in place, and you are still crying of liquidity problem on the part of these banks, and that's a need while you are now bringing these investors to take over these banks. Are we now sure now that amcon will be able to broker a proper truce between new investors, the shareholders, and the existing management team now?
Sorry, which shareholders are we talking about now? Because as far as these banks are concerned, the person who owns the banks are amcon, or is amcon rather, because amcon has taken over the banks, has bought them off the NDIC. So which shareholders are we talking about?
Look at how it works now. It's like a system. Take for example now, amcon will come now, say, what is the value of your toxic asset? Take for example, your toxic asset is like ₦1 million now. AMCON now tries to evaluate what is the actual asset that was actually given out, and they now net it off based on what actually was actually given out and the interest, so as to be able to get the actual value. We now have the situation whereby AMCON by law, actually, even though they are actually by law enabled to be able to broker between organizations, financial banks, but there's need for a solid management team, and that's when the investors need to come in. So in order for them to realize back this money, because it's coming from a source, and investors need to come in place. As it is now, we have the situation whereby like Spring Bank now, talking about or like Bank PHB, like the investors from Pakistan, or we look at like Spring Bank, whereby internally, locally, the management team have been fighting over takeover, who has the largest stake, and that has affected any investors who come say, your team is not properly organized, I don't think my money, and that's why they've been pulling out their money, party A, party B. But
as it is now, Bank PHB is dead. It's dead and buried. Bridge banks were formed to manage the assets of this banks, these dead banks, through the NDIC, and as that Saturday they ceased to be bridge banks. They were now banks by themselves when they were bought over by AMCON. So as it is now, it seems AMCON is the only shareholder in this new banks, and they're looking for investors. They say it's going to take maybe about a period of 3 years or thereabouts.
Well, that is what they usually say. But insider related, we have actually confirmed that there's already a lot of things going off the air. And I won't be surprised in 6 months' time again, they will now come up with another policy now that, okay, yes, they've already gotten 1 or 2 persons, and these persons actually should manage the organization A, B. Actually, the change of name is appropriate as a result of the Keystone. You have the Mainstream and the other one, Enterprise Banking, so as to ensure complete takeover by AMCON and NDIC. But how will the process be actually concluded? Will it go through the due process so as to avoid insider trading? Will it, based on Buffer Act, will they ensure that no special interests and all necessary stakeholders are accommodated, especially the shareholders, so as to ensure that the whole process are in place?
Which shareholders? That's what I'm trying to get, especially the shareholders. You keep referring to shareholders.
Why I keep referring to the shareholders is that originally, like the banks, what constitutes the banks? Take for example, like that's why you have your annual general meeting where shareholders come. But if you are now saying that AMCON have bought over shareholders, I'm yet to be reliably informed as regards that, because today one policy, tomorrow they change one policy.
But if SEC has placed the suspension, their shares have been placed in suspension, which is a first step towards delisting of these stocks, and they're not saying anything about paying off any shareholders. Doesn't that say that there are no more shareholders in that place?
Bet me, I'm sure the court, they will still visit the court. We have the situation whereby 6 months from now, you tell me that Supreme Court or one court decided now that, okay, yes, they should hand it over back to the preferred owner. We've had a problem because it's an economic anomaly from the process it has started from day one down to this day. But the ultimate interest is okay. It excites our intelligentsia, because we are looking at a situation whereby Sanusi believes that, okay, all banks must be properly liquid so as to be able to show up for global economic crisis.
That's where we come in again. Being a financial consultant, you've been talking about investors' confidence, back and forth. Look at this new ministry created by the president, trade and investment. And loads of people have started coming into the country already. Well, this development, do you think is going to affect such ministry and would-be investors?
It will. It will. But looking at the rate of foreign direct investment that has come into Africa, take for example now that about 60% of foreign direct investment that has come into Africa, about, let's say, 35% came into the West Africa, while others from east to north. But we have the situation whereby those who dictate the pipe are actually deciding where they channel their money. It's as a result of decline or refusal from the United Nations to pay attention to Somalia That is why we are experiencing the Horn of Africa or the food crisis over there. We have the situation whereby they allow you to be able to get into that economic mess before they now come to your aid. But looking at that ministry that has been created, we believe that if they work hand in hand with Nigerian foreign expatriates or ministers, it will be able to ensure that we show up our influence, especially from the global economic crisis that is coming in. You agree with me that as a result of our consolidation, 2004-5, it helps us to be able to boost the economy, and that is why we are not immediately affected. But not until entrepreneurs are actually taken care of, SMEs are actually instituted properly, it will affect a lot of things, our GDP. Take for example, looking at Nigerian GDP, as at 2010, it recorded about 7.29%, while this year now, we are still, our half quarter now is about 6.9, which shows that we need to do a lot of things. So that ministry has to be handled by professionals who are entrepreneurial inclined,